Hello, human beings, wherever you may be on the planet. Hope you're doing well. Gary Turner here. First things first, it is actually my birthday. I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. 46 years spinning around this blue orb. Don't know how the heck I've made it, to be honest. So far, testicular cancer, adolescent bullying in the workplace, dysfunction all over the place. I'm like, Jesus, how have I made it? It's amazing. Anyway, very positively, I have an incredible wife, amazing family, amazing network of human beings. And that's what I'm here today really to share is, and it's going to be a long one, right? So if you pop in or you pop out, this is going live right now to LinkedIn, to YouTube, and also to Twitter. And if you're curious about the writing that I'm about to share, I've made people aware that I'm on LinkedIn much less these days because I'm tending to write on Medium. So medium.com/at Gary Thinking Partner, one word. If you're interested at all in anything that I might be writing about, tends to be a lot around vulnerability, leadership, culture, systems, this type of thing, sustainability, then do go on over and check out my Medium page. It'd be lovely to have you subscribe there and join me on these meandering journeys. As always, for those that know me, and even if you don't know me, my approach to all of this is very much from a place of curiosity. It's from a place of deep connectedness. It's from a place of deep vulnerability and from a real deep place of inquiry and wonder, really. So with it being my 46th birthday today, and I'm recording this for myself, but hoping in the act of recording this, it offers some value to someone out there, whether you pop on live or listen or watch this back at some point in the future. But just an extra point to emphasize, if you do check out anything at my Medium page, I am tending also to narrate the different blogs I do to try and improve accessibility. And of course, all the different hyperlinks are available at the blogging site as well at medium.com/thinking partner. So that's sort of the setup for today. The name for this particular one is around some birthday systemic and personal reflections. And again, as I mentioned, 46 years old today. Am I beyond half past my life? Probably. Should I still be here after having testicular cancer 2 years ago? Well, clearly I still am. So I'm very lucky and grateful to have Western medicine. But does everybody have that access? Not necessarily. So let me get into it. I'm actually going to be narrating 4 blogs today, which is why it's going to go on a bit. I'd normally do them independently, but again, for my own reflection, as well as for any value for other people, it's really to interweave for what I see connected, reflective pieces that I've put out into the world in the last month, how they're all joining together for me and how I feel they're going to inform who I am and what I become, as well as the work that I'm going to be doing more as I go forward. So let me start with the first one. The first blog is called An Ode to Global South Women. And it's actually a poem. Every now and again, I do get a little bit creative. Don't always know where it comes from. Don't need to know where it comes from, I guess. But if you want to check out, again, the blogs are all at medium.com. I'm going to leave that up as I narrate, just to make sure that people know where they can find these different blogs. So here we go. The first blog is An Ode to Global South Women, a poem. So this poem has emerged heavily based on an incredibly moving and powerful webinar that was held by IBON International yesterday. So yesterday was the 8th of September 2022. And it was all about winning the wrestle. Women speak out on struggle and resistance. However, what also happened yesterday was that Her Majesty the Queen of England passed away, aged 96. Now, I'm not going to say much more than there is something very connected, poetic, and possible for me, this is Gary speaking, about the andness of these two events. So learning as I have, especially over the past 2 years, about how we in the West, especially in the UK, and do hold this, don't get defensive, please. If you're in the West or in the UK in particular, we're largely responsible for the seeds of global colonization over the past 500 to 600 years. And of course, the role of monarchy, church, and state in that. So I honor the human being and leader, absolutely, that was the Queen, who led through a very different context and time. And she did indeed, to be fair, I feel, model many of the human traits, at least on the surface, that we've been missing for a long time. Things like listening, humility, connectedness, and more. Yet, and she did head up a hugely extractive and colonial system that perpetuates division and harm even today in 2022. So it's not fully her, your, or my direct fault, if you like. You know, me and you living in the West, of course it can't be. But in this liminal space, this space that exists between different worlds, you know, there's some huge potential to reimagine, to join more systemic dots, and to get super curious about what is now possible in terms of understanding, redesigning, healing, both locally, but especially on a global basis. So for me, the universe is dealing up something quite profound, I sense. And also with King Charles's environmental lens on the world, will he quite literally take the reins in a different direction, in a different way? I'm curious. So here's to the poem. In the capitalist West, where we think we're best, the fear is setting in, people can feel it in their chest. While sales looks to growth, HR looks to process, finance counts the pennies, the disconnection is becoming grotesque. Whether to the extreme, supply chains in a state of collapse, maybe let's start using a collective compass instead of fixating on a narrow, individualistic map. Let's move away from competing to win, whilst those communities central, who are too out of our minds and in the bin, are unable to sense the interconnections of life and all things. Women, especially in the global south, are doing 3 times more unpaid work than men to keep food on the table and in their mouths. Often working 16-hour days, we have got to find new ways to center these women and communities far away. We are bearing the brunt for our disconnected ways and our insatiable hunt in the West for more profits, for the accumulation of more. Yet in Sri Lanka right now, the economy is on the floor. 60% inflation on 1 kilo of rice. How much do we need in the West? When is enough to suffice? Long hours without power. It may seem so far away, yet industry in Germany is slowing down quickly. This is no longer a game. West Papuan women fight for their indigenous lands, resisting the assault on their way of life, using their own hands. Land grabbing is cited to be the new phase of colonialism. Where is this on the news in the West, as we focus on M&A and trying to be bigger and the best? As we navigate this one shot at life, how can we allow such strife to be unleashed on those who have done no wrong? Surely it is time to create a new song. No longer can the top 26 most rich people on this blue earth have more accumulated wealth than the poorest 180 countries. There is such a deep dearth of connection, of fear, of ego, and worse. And then this poem takes a deeply personal turn, one that strikes at the heart of the industry from which I earn. My salary, my food, my way of life. It is uncomfortable to know that I am, as Gary, directly linked to this strife. That these amazing global south women face thousands of miles away from my place. They're being impacted by multinational corporations selling chemicals like I do that are seeking to displace, knowingly or unwise or unknowingly, their indigenous knowledge handed down for thousands of years, all just so in the West we can live without any perceived fears of accessing global foods on our shelves every day. But where is the learning and appreciation if we are not ourselves having a play with asking more questions of our employers and at home? Do people even realize quite how precarious things are right now on this globe? These global south women know it all too well. For way too long, they've been living their own version of hell. Yet yesterday, these women modeled such courage and grace, an alliance of true leaders, imagining anew and directly in the face of a collapsing system that cares about no one. Such inspiring resistance. Thank you for raising this awareness, Ibon. That's the first piece. I'd love to know if you've watched this live or watching it back, what's popping up for you. If you don't want to comment publicly on Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn, please drop me a DM. You know, what's challenging? What do you find comforting? What do you find interesting? What do you find curious? You know, I'm not seeking to be right, never am, just seeking to question, to be curious, to really scratch below the surface. You know, what's really going on beyond our home lives, our work lives, and our Western perception of normal? What's really going on? What do we scratch what's happening on below the matrix if we scratch below the surface? So that was the first one. So I'm going to share my screen now and go to the second piece of 4 that I'm sharing today on 13th of September 2022, this energy ball called Gary Turner, my 46th birthday. So here we go. Hopefully you're seeing that okay. So centering others, self-centering, and self-care. And I wrote this piece 2 days ago on the 11th of September. So before today's session 6 of the Possible Futures Cruise Intro to Decolonial Sustainability course, I was already in some depths of shedding, but on being part of this incredibly rich, challenging, and diverse 2-hour exploration today, it has made even more sense why I, as Gary, I'm in this phase within my own experience of life. So the headline grab, as I call it. This was on the 11th of September. So over the past 6 days, I've been progressively and diligently reviewing and disconnecting from a high percentage of my so-called connections on LinkedIn. That number on Tuesday, the 6th of September, was greater than 6,700 connections. Today, that number, as of the 11th of September, is exactly 1627. That's a 76%, a 3/4 reduction in my active connections. And I found it curious that it's almost Pareto's 80-20 rule. Something that's further interesting is that the context behind that rule of Pareto is very relevant for today. I.e., they observe that 80% of the wealth was in the hands of only 20% of the people in Italy. Of course, Pareto is from the global north in Italy, and that situation, we all know, has gotten worse since the late 1900s when he first deduced that idea. So again, just to show you, 1,626 connections as of the 11th of September. So more to follow in this blog as to what I've learned as Gary, and also what's clarified for me as part of this emergent process. So what's the connected learning from today? So there was much connected learning, but the key insight that weaves into this blog was when Heather Luna shared in discussion with B. Lorraine Smith and Samantha Sapaya something like as follows. And again, this is linked to the Intro to Decolonial Sustainability course. It's not such a bad thing to lose the system the way that it is. Brackets, we need relationships with those outside of the systems, i.e. outside of the matrix as we know it today. So how could I, as Gary, possibly have the capacity and the energy to learn about and over time connect with humans that operate outside of the systems as we and I currently know it, if I am wrapped up in scrolling through hours of rarely additive nor game-changing posts and shares on LinkedIn, just as one example? So I've been lacking the intentionality in some areas, despite feeling I've been pretty intentional. So, point 1, centering others. There is much literature around othering out there in the ether, but this blog is seeking in part to center others in the most meaningfully and impactful way. And let me explain what I mean by this as follows. A number of my Caucasian network have struggled to understand what I'm pointing to when I talk about decentering myself or centering global South communities, for example. That's point A. Point B, actually, it's a really good opportunity to weave in a constructive challenge that I received from Gillian Marcel, PhD, recently, directly linked to my poor, as Gary, my poor centering of others. And as I say, I'm continuously work in progress every single day, like all of us. So understanding those pesky culture patterns. So with regards A, first of all, let me offer an invitation to check out the work of Tema Okun. Again, you can find all of the hyperlinks to these different blogs on my Medium column that you can find at the bottom of the screen right now. So Temma's work over 30 years has been studying human culture patterns. Now, I reference her work a lot, as does one of my teachers, Heather Luna, and she continues to be one of my paid supports as she helps me spot patterns within myself and those around me. So these patterns of behavior, I'm talking about fear, qualification, binary thinking, and linked in part 2 of this blog, sorry, part B, defensiveness. So to decenter ourselves, to me as Gary, is to intentionally make those humans and communities that are rarely in the center of our Western organizational dialogue or organizational design exactly that, central. And in fact, I wrote a blog as below, following some recent clarity around this very topic. And that blog, again, you can find it at my Medium blog, is How Colonizers Are Thinking in Western Business and What May Be the Impact. So let me give you a thought experiment. If you were designing your next 3-year plan and mergers and acquisition strategy as an oil or chemical company, but with those communities at the center, would you really seek to acquire the local firms or look to expand production into their backyards, risking destroying their local culture and their local habitat if they were central by design and not an externality or a part of our mind that's easily forgotten about? So today I would assert that the global minority, that's us in the West, we are suffering from a colonized mindset, whether we know it or not. And regardless of our skin color or where we live, we all fall foul of these 18 patterns of behavior that Temma speaks of and has researched. And if we are not keeping them in check consciously, i.e. if we're not talking about them, if we're not creating the space to observe and witness and challenge them, alongside a decentering of ourselves and a centering of the communities and people most harmed by our current ways. Like, we need to be able to bring all of that complexity into our day-to-day dialogue within ourselves and those around us, I would assert. So hoping that helps somehow, friends. And in case this is still confusing, here is a video below I recorded a few months ago, again connecting some dots between the indigenous people of West Papua, just off the west coast of Papua New Guinea, global financial services, and modern life. Staying curious. You can find that, again, the hyperlink is at my Medium page, and it takes you straight to my YouTube channel where you can find that video. So I also wrote a piece the other day that led to me losing some subscribers, which is the one I just narrated, which was centering the perspectives of women in the global South. Another concrete example of what it looks like to decenter ourselves in the West and to center those most harmed currently. So again, hoping it brings that decentering, centering of those most harmed into clarity for you. So with regards to B, you can find the exchange between Gillian and I with some summary narrative and personal learning as below. So this post, just for full disclosure, has now been removed from LinkedIn as per Gillian's suggestion and invitation, and I'll explain why now. Now, the first thing to own up and be vulnerable about is that my inner heart rate was going up and my defensiveness was kicking in when I was challenged by Gillian, which, by the way, again, to emphasize the point, is one of the 18 culture patterns that Temma speaks of. Now, I went back fairly quickly, see, with an initial message, and then very quickly within my body, I realized I was going defensive and that this was a cultural pattern that was unhelpful. So I took a breath. How often do you and we actually take a breath when our brains are racing, when our emotions are firing? I took a breath, deleted it, and replaced it with the comment above. And then this is the blog that followed, as I promised Gillian would follow. Now, the original intention behind my original post was to share an interesting debate about degrowth versus green growth, and to invite my network, which are predominantly global north, to seek and listen out for global south references, because my assumption, assuming makes an ass of you and me, was that there will be few and far between references to the global south, and my desire was to have an ongoing debate to follow about why is that, why didn't we pick up on that pattern, etc. However, the problem was, as Gillian was rightly challenging, was my sharing as a white Caucasian male in the chemical industry of an event with 2 male leading thinkers with a white woman facilitator was not very decentering. Now, this is important. Now, this was not at all about white versus black. It wasn't about skin tone, although it's relevant, but it was about Gillian reminding me that I was centering global north perspectives. And there is actually much more evidence of this happening just far too often with another pertinent example below. And what I share in the blog is a link to a BBC article around climate change, voices from the global south being muted by climate science. You can start to see the linkages here with my role within chemistry. My role was trying to embody holding space within a corporate setting and outside, and what's going on within the global south in terms of oppression, etc. So hopefully you're starting to see why I wanted to narrate these seemingly disconnected pieces as part of this birthday gift to myself, but also I hope to you out there as well. I'm hoping you're finding some value. So once again, a critically important conversation was taking place that did not center those being most harmed by our Western ways. And so what, you may be asking? The so what, and this links again to the decolonial course that Possible Futures are leading that I referenced earlier in this blog and today. Everything is about relationships. And if we are not going out of our way to understand and learn about the lives and perspectives of those most harmed, and then putting them central to all of the design and decision making, we just perpetuate the current colonial thinking. And indeed, I would assert we will recolonize the world with clever technology, carbon capture, meeting the SDGs, and well-intentioned spirituality. We're all connected, we're all one, but still taking us all off a cliff because we're not actually solving the root cause problems of systemic injustice, both environmentally, systemically, and in the global south. But of course, we go off the cliff with more comfort. It's a very weird suicide pact. So on to self-censoring. I, like so many of us in the West, have been conditioned to believe that since very early on, I, Gary Turner, are the most important vessel of energy on the planet, and that I have a right to strive for being the biggest and best of everything, and then with little to zero consideration about the impact of or footprint of my choices. Okay. Now, as I've written about many, many times, I am and always will be permanently work in progress. That's why I keep talking about it. Yet the life lessons of the past 7 years for me as Gary have made it painfully clear that the more we myopically focus on ourselves without combining the understanding of our colonial thinking, whilst also not holding complex perspectives and dialogue, the less likely we are to have the inner capacity within ourselves to sense and feel at a bodily level, not just at a head level, and we'll also lack the ability to let go of unhelpful patterns of behavior, scarcity thinking, etc. And that will be more likely to struggle to let in differing perspectives and insights. So all of this complexity of our own inner stories, our inner narratives, our inner landscape, if we're not actively embracing and understanding those patterns of behavior that we have within us, our leaders have, our family have, and then holding that with trying to center the global south perspective, it seems really difficult and complex, and it is complex, but it's not difficult when we can allow the space, when we slow down, when we connect to ourselves other than systems. So a little bit of a diversion for me, but I honestly cannot invite that embracing complexity and challenge in a more meaningful way. So if this feels big and new to you, I would understand. I empathize, and I offer you the olive branch of a 2.5-year project that I've been engaged in, a podcast called Value Through Vulnerability, which you can find hyperlinked to iTunes below in this blog. And I still refer to those dialogues myself today. It's 138 full episodes touching courage, vulnerability, listening, mental health, diversity and inclusion, but honestly, very Western focused, if I'm honest, because that's where I've been in that part of my own journey. But I would assert that if we're not doing that work in the West already, we're going to really struggle to sense and center those in the global south. So we've really got to get inside, go inside, do that inner work, and super quickly. And I think I just got a lovely little message from one of my colleagues saying happy birthday, which you may all have seen, which is sweet. So I also speak from experience as someone that has suffered from suppressed emotions and conditioned thinking for most of my 45 years on the planet, up until today, which is my 46th year. And indeed, I shared this as part of my talk at Cornell Thomas, my brother from another mother, a part of his Positivity Summit in July 2022. So I'm actually going to try and share this clip with you that the wonderful videographer Maciek actually pulled together for me, because I really believe there's some value in this for you as well. There will be another Positivity Summit coming to the UK on the 28th of April, 2023, and I'm helping Cornell organise that. So I'm just going to play this for you, and I hope you find some value in it.
Gary Turner.
For the first 35 years of my life, I strive for the next job, the next holiday, the next house. I did not know why I was striving so hard for that stuff that was outside of me. We are the leaders that we're looking for. Every single one of you sitting here right now are a self-leader. This is community. What I'm witnessing today, that level of insight we just shared in 20 minutes could transform the system. Think about what you want and how you want to impact. Am I staying curious? Or am I going down judgment and fear? At the end of the day, the very things that are going to turn around systemic injustice, environmental collapse, the workplace being as toxic as it is pretty much everywhere in the world, is the inner skills that we already have. I just really want to invite people to get super curious. If you take nothing else away, that change is an inside job. Just a minute, change is an inside job. Change is an inside job. Change is an inside job. If there's any bit of your heart that's been given to anybody else or anything else, is it you? Get it back in there today. Okay? So I'm hoping that that gave you some value today. And that's just as part of the blog that I wanted to put out there today. So again, 28th of April, 2023, Cornell Thomas will be bringing his Positivity Summit to the UK. There may be a second one happening, but I really invite you, join us, pop along. We'd really love to invite you to be in a space that allows us to sense, build community, allow ourselves to drop below the surface of the busyness of the matrix that we're all wrapped up in, which is why we have this colonized thinking, right? Urgency is one of those patterns that Tema Okun speaks about so clearly. So on to self-care. For me personally, there's an important difference between self-care and self-centering, the latter as described above. So it's of critical importance that we find our various ways to stay healthy, laugh and have fun, to stay connected meaningfully, to stay curious, and to feel that we're part of community. However, I would assert that by getting used to holding the complexity of prioritizing our self-care and decentering ourselves as often as possible, and by intentionally centering those too rarely in our mind's eye, yet too often being harmed, i.e. those in the global south, and within our daily business discussions and conversations, we really could start to move towards the co-creation of new narratives that serves all of life and not just a narrow subset. So indeed, my friend and co-host Shahana and I are in the throngs of an emergent co-creative live stream series called Community Campfires. Now, I just want to give a little acknowledgement to Shahana. You can find Shahana's details there on the screen right now if you want to go and find out more about her and her emergent work that she's doing. And should you have any interest to join in the collective reimagining underway, yes, there are more diverse and decentered perspectives planned. That's what we want to get more of. But for now, we're just got some diversity, but it's more people that are just ready to be in this dialogue at the moment. It tends to be Western, but we're hoping to get more global South voices over time. So as we go to wrap up this particular part of this blog, how does what I've shared in this section of blog number 2 today, how does it link to my LinkedIn connections being streamlined, you may ask? So actually, this reflective blog really does tie a bow on it, to be honest. So let me share with you what I learned about disconnecting from 3/4 of my LinkedIn network over the last past week. Less than 10% of my over 6,700 connections had ever spoken with me and or had ever answered my call via message to seek a 20-minute meet or greet. So actually, there's a mass disconnection within my so-called connections. Hashtag irony. I also had, I'm acknowledging this, I also had some of my self-worth wrapped up in being connected to well over 30 so-called thought leaders. And yes, on reflection, 90% were white, many were male, and pretty much all were based in the West. A link to the qualification culture pattern that Tema Okun speaks about. All bar 4 of those genuinely transformational thought leaders are now still connections with me. And why? Because there's an actively engaged relationship with those people. That's not belittling it. That's not because it's color of skins, etc. But it's just trying to bring to life when we have a colonized mindset or there's colonized patterns of behavior that we're perpetuating. We don't see these patterns, even in our own networks. We don't see it in our family. We don't see it in the workplace. So that's the invitation. My network up until 3 years ago, and bear in mind, I've been on LinkedIn actively for over 16 years, was overwhelmingly white. So as I disconnected from all manner of human, from different background, different contexts, different parts of the world, it was interesting to see that the 1,627 that are left are much more naturally diverse. Yeah, my network is naturally more diverse as a result, as I've come through this place of connectedness, awareness, systemic awareness, inclusion, etc. And important to note, it could be deemed, you might be looking at this going, oh, this is all a bit tick boxy, but it really, really isn't. My thought process, whilst disconnecting, and indeed choosing who to stay connected to, and indeed this will be the protocol on which I will accept future connections or indeed make future connection requests, is based on a blend of the following. Number 1, connections from any function within the up or downstream global supply chain within chemicals, energy, oil, of which I'm part. What I mean by that, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, food, etc. Number 2, true game changers as I perceive them in the people, culture, and transformational space, i.e. they are adding and constructively challenging our structures and thinking as part of inclusive and constructive dialogue. On the other side, they are not people just parroting and sharing and just repeating other people's stuff. That's not where I want to be. Young, disruptive people, or those already known that are young person connections to me. So they're really either early in their journey, but they're really bringing fresh perspectives, new ideas, that curiosity. Inspiring, game-changing humans from diverse backgrounds and perspectives who are already connected to me and who are a mix of already meaningfully engaged and connected, or I seek or desire for that to become the case. And 5, protagonists and deep thinkers from within the sustainability and regeneration space. So ideally going forward, my connections will be the widest intersectional mix of those 5 things I just shared. And I will not actively reach out to connect if there is not an alignment within at least one of those 5 areas. Those are my new boundaries. That is the space in which I wish to occupy. That's what I know I will give energy most to and what I will most receive energy from. That is as far away from an echo chamber as I could possibly be. That is the point about this. This is about holding complexity for dialogue, for challenge, for reimagining. And it's about getting away from the toxicity of more of the same and just perpetuating same old, all whilst not centering those that are most harmed by our Western ways. And what was really fun was reviewing the following blog, which you can see, this blog I wrote at the beginning of 2021, which is it time to truly reimagine how we design organizations and life? And honestly, when I wrote that, I was only starting to truly sense at a bodily level the deep systemic nature of all life and my role and the impact on it as part of the chemicals industry. So yes, the breadcrumbs around redesign and centering those areas of work that are too rarely central really strikes a chord. Yet if you go and read that blog, which you can hyperlink again through this blog on my Medium channel, you can really start to see that this was a very Western-centered piece still. So today, I would for sure add those communities and peoples that are not in the room into the center as well. Some may say that this is some may say that this is the DEI piece, but it's clear to me over the last several weeks that much of Western DEI suffers with the same colonial patterns that Tema Okun speaks of. So it's all about coming in open heart. So my phrase is really like-hearted and open-minded. That's the energy that I really want to be involved in with these people going forward. So final comment, LinkedIn is not set up to support the centering of the global majority perspectives. So bit by bit, I'm intending through that mix of decentering myself, practicing healthy self-care, and through actively seeking differing and constructive perspectives from folks too rarely in the room, that my own focus of work and practice can evolve, and that I can then be in the best service of all life myself, and then hopefully lay some breadcrumbs for future generations as I continue to decenter myself going forward. That is 35 minutes, and the first 2 are 4 blogs that I wanted to share today. So what's the odds of somebody actually watching or listening to this back? I've got absolutely no idea. But again, for me personally, my own becoming, my future work on this day, my birthday, as I start the 46th year, yeah, as I go through my 46th year on the planet, this is important, feels important to me. So again, I hope you're finding some value if you pop in at any point. And let's go into 2 very recent blogs. So one that I published today on my birthday, and then I'm going to pop back in time a little bit, 10 days back to September the 3rd, where I talk a bit about what I took away from Joe Homstead and I's last human development space. Because I'm downloading a lot of information, a lot of invitations, but I also acknowledge if you are Caucasian, a white man, if you're somebody that's based in the West and you're hearing all of this for the first time, you may be like, where the heck do I go? Like, I don't have anywhere safe to go and even ask questions about this stuff. And that's in part what the human development space exists for, is to create the conditions to have this type of dialogue. So let me go into the third of 4 blogs. Here it comes. And this one, as I say, was published today. It was also a post on LinkedIn, but it's so important to me, and a signpost as to where I believe we are all going, that I wanted to share it as part of this reflective live stream today. So, big topic, decolonizing chemistry, the industry that I'm part of and beyond. So let me pop that back out there. So this blog is a blog that I put out earlier today, which is today, Tuesday the 13th September 2022, the day on which I celebrate my 46th spin around this blue orb. And alongside 2 other recent pieces, an ode to the Global South, women, and centering others, centering and self-care, it feels somehow the right day to weave these 3 seemingly different but deeply connected things together as my personal integration and life's work becomes clearer. Hence the live stream. So this is the post I put out on LinkedIn, as well as what I'm narrating now as part of the blog. So I'm super curious about the ongoing and at times myopic focus on technical and surface level change and transformation in many sectors, including that of which I'm part, chemicals. So yet too rarely, if ever, can I find dedicated and deep work being done around our mindsets, especially within leadership in the workplace, and outdated organizational design, both within chemicals and beyond. And again, I reference a blog from earlier, querying how colonized our minds are in the West, including my own. So my key questions and invitations for you today to reflect on are this. To what extent can we really, honestly, start to turn the tide on environmental and social injustice if we, individually and collectively, are not doing the work in the West to decolonize our minds, our thinking, our design, and our practices? How does that land with you? I'm really, really, really curious. How does that question, where do you feel it in your body? Where do you feel it in your head? Are you curious to explore that? Do you run away from it? You're just like, it's a load of rubbish. I don't believe that's the case anymore. Just allow yourself to sit in whatever's coming up for you in this moment is my invitation. Okay? That is the invitation. So going on to the next question. To what extent are we centering those most harmed by our current and increasingly outdated thinking and structures as systems break down? And what role may our colonized thinking be playing in that? 2 pretty big, deep questions that we're probably unlikely to be diving in too much as part of business as usual. But I'm really, really curious how that lands with you. So for clarity, because this is not stuff I've been working on for years, only because Samantha Sapaya, one of the key folks within the Possible Futures crew, has been supporting me for nearly 2 years now, with sensing into these depths of oppression and genocide and division and the impact from capitalism and our Western consumerist society, and our own desire for right to comfort, as Tamarokan speaks about. All of these interweaving connections, right? We can all have a look at those more if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, if we allow ourselves to get curious, etc. So for clarity, one description of decolonization is as follows. Decolonizing education, however, is often understood as the process in which we rethink, reframe, and reconstruct the curricula and research that preserve the Europe-centered colonial lens. So basically, locking out, as I shared about previously, global South perspectives regarding climate research, locking out the thinking and the understanding as to how the land serves us as humans, and that we should be grateful for what it provides us. Why us going in potentially, again, my own industry, my role, I'm digressing, but it's important. I sell products that go into agrochemical products, which are then sold on into markets such as Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia as ways to get better yields. But what we're also doing, even if we get a better yield, we're actually impacting the impact of the soil, and we're actually destroying local indigenous knowledge for their own local seeds that have been handed down for generations and generations. There's a lot in this that we really that we need to explore. This is critical, and it's something I keep trying to bring into the corporate space and will continue to do. And I believe actually this is a critical part of my work going forward, is trying to hold space for this type of dialogue. So this powerful piece below from the University of York is starting to lift the lid on just how colonized thinking is within the chemistry industry and functions, and how that thinking lacks, importantly, the diversity of the field of chemistry more widely. And of course, we can only start to imagine the problems with developing an intentionally diverse talent pipeline going forward as well, if we do not actually look at this in the face together with curiosity, with love, with constructive challenge, and with the desire to decolonize our thinking and our structures. Okay, absolutely critical. So do check out the blog. Again, you can find it at medium.com/@Gary Turner Thinking Partner. Do have a look at this, whether you're in the chemical industry or not. I think you'll find it interesting, because this translates across the Western business institution and function, regardless of where you are in the world right now. So further evidence as to why this is important is, again, I mentioned it earlier, the Global South voices and research is often locked out of publishing and peer review, as per this BBC article. So I ask you, what role does our colonized thinking have in this outcome that I'm describing? So for context, I continue to receive support with helping me spot these patterns of fear, of urgency, of binary thinking, of perfectionism, importantly, of the right to comfort, and more. And you too can get this support. Heather Luna is an incredible human being who I've been working with, again, for the best part of 9 to 12 months now. And it is she that has helped me so much. I'm just going to pop her onto the screen for a second, because if you are curious about these patterns of behavior and you'd like to invest a little bit in yourself, here she is, Heather Luna from Kejuzi. I've been working with her for nearly 9 months now around helping me spot these patterns of behavior, patterns of thinking in myself and those around me, with examples from my own sector. So no judgment, right? This is such an important point. There is no judgment in these shares. It is all about curiosity and how do we interrogate and question together and individually these different patterns of behavior that not only hold us back, but holding back those in the global South and in so-called developing countries from living the lives that they want to lead. Okay, so what role does colonized thinking have in this outcome? So lots to ponder, but also lots of opportunity to let go of unhelpful patterns that not only harm others, but it also leads to us putting our self-worth and value on things outside of us. Yeah, So in the end, it's this really weird self-harming. Like we're harming ourselves by not doing the work of decolonizing our thinking and our structures and our workplaces. Just think about this for a second. This is not just all hokey cokey, let's try and right the wrongs of the past. While that is absolutely central and critical, like we're all connected. Every system, food system, environmental system, social justice system, food, it's all connected. And if we're not trying to center where the most harm is caused, we cannot solve for us all. This is the point. So if this is an area of exploration that piques your interest, I would love to connect with you. Right, that's 3 out of 4 done. 3 out of 4 blogs now spoken about. Okay, so I'm going on to the 4th one. And just a reminder for anyone that's popping up, thank you for popping along. I can't see your names, so I'm just going to say, hey back. Sorry, if you can pop your name in the chat, I can at least acknowledge you properly in your full name. Thanks for popping along. And also thank you for the hand clap, other LinkedIn user. This is the problem with StreamYard. It's an amazing platform, but the names don't always come through. So on to the final and 4th blog. Just a reminder, I've spoken about 3 blogs so far. One talking about how do we actually center the oppressed and women's voices from the global south, speaking about how do we decolonize chemistry in the West. Yeah, and I'm about to go into now my 4th and final blog of this particular live today, which again is a reflective blog for me as Gary on my 46th birthday, because this is a line in the sand for who I'm becoming and what my work is going forward. But I also want to really acknowledge that this stuff can seem big. It is big. It needs to be big. But also we can co-create the conditions to go deep into this, to allow ourselves the space to slow down, the antidotes to those colonial patterns of thinking. Again, I also want to remind you, don't get hung up on white supremacy culture info as a name. Tema Okun's work can be found at this website, completely free of charge, 30 years of research into why these patterns of behavior are a major problem with the racial divide that we see quite often. Fear, again, urgency, binary thinking, qualification, these 18 patterns of behavior, that we all suffer from them, regardless of where we live in the world, what the color of our skin is, the level of affluence that we have or that we don't have. Getting to grips with these patterns and having the space to look at them, to interrogate them, to discuss them without judgment, without fear, without running away from it. This is the work. This is the work I want to be involved more in. And this is the work I believe we all need to be involved in, but particularly my kinfolk in the West, because we currently have a lot more influence and ability to try and turn the tide of this tanker. And we're not going to see it in our lifetime, right? This is what my systemic guide, Samantha Sapaya, keeps reminding me of, right? This is not my work to do for now. This is work that I'm doing so that my kids and those global South kids and those kids in Latin America in generations to come have actually got a bloody chance to live on a thrivable planet, right? And with less systemic injustice. So into the 4th and final blog. How the Human Development Space 2022 clarified its impact for me personally. So just to give you a bit of a frame, human development spaces have been created by myself and Joe Homstead. It's a very emergent, co-creative, self-organized experience. So Stephanie Smith tried to explain what these spaces are, because the interesting thing is they're not spaces that people are used to going into. We're used to going into spaces that are fully formed. They have a big, long agenda. You have a sage on the stage. It's all about the big names. This is unconference on steroids, is probably the best way, probably not the best analogy. But what I want to do, because sometimes it's better to let someone explain it than have me try and explain it, someone that actually attended. So what I'm going to do just quickly, and again, this is my own reflection, but also anyone that might be watching this now, is I want to share with you the feedback that Steph offered from attending last time. So I'm just trying to find that. Here we go. So I'm just going to play a video let me just stop this share for a second. Okay, so this gives you a sense of the space that a human development space offers. Stephanie Smith, a wonderful human who's coming back in 2023, shared this.
I am noticing is that so many of us feel constrained by space in our lives, by time. And the past 2 days have all been about space and slowing down time. I've just spent the past 2 days in what would normally be called a workshop, or maybe a retreat, but actually it's neither of those two things. It was a space that allowed intelligent, experienced professionals to set the conditions, which meant that we could all do the work that we were bringing with us. And by work, I don't mean writing emails or strategizing or doing business plans. I mean the work that is about understanding ourselves, figuring out where we're holding ourselves back, looking at what's possible, where we're offering things in to the group, and everybody is able to extract, to take out, take from it, reflect on whatever they need to. And it's just reinforced for me how important it is when you feel time constrained, when you feel like you don't have space. The tendency is to shrink even smaller, to do things more quickly, to spend less time on stuff. Whereas actually what's possible when you tip it on its head and you make time and you slow down and you create the conditions for you to be able to do the work you need to do. So although I haven't done work in the traditional sense of the word for the past 2 days, I know that what's happened here will mean that when I get back to the office and when I get back with my clients, the work is going to be that much better, deeper, more impactful. And I'm loving that energy. And I can't wait to come back again.
So that's just to share Steph's experience of the human development space in July of last year. It was this year, sorry. And just to let you know, there will be a human development space in January 18th, 19th, 2023, and also the 5th and 6th of July, 2023. And that's open for anybody. Yeah, you might work in a corporate, you might be a solopreneur. It is a space for people to connect at a deeply human level. We co-create the agenda together. We co-facilitate together. We offer into the space. It's a totally self-organized, self-generated, emergent experience, unlike anything else I'm sure most of humanity has experienced, certainly in the West. So let me get back into the blog just to explain a bit more. So, So again, this is about my own learning from what did I take away and what was really clarified for me as part of this last space that we all shared. So again, told you the dates for next year. Also, just to let you know, if you do have a look at my website on Medium, medium.com/Gary Turner. Again, you can find all the hyperlinks. There's actually a YouTube channel, which I think I'll just pop up for you briefly. And what is quite interesting is that there's actually a big old list of feedback from people that have attended previously. There's also lots of videos about the different rooms you can stay on site. You can see there's some personal reflections from me and how it impacted myself on there. So lots of sort of context and background should you be interested to come along. And again, no, this is no big pitch. Like, the space is incredible, and it's just for the right people that they will find their way there. So we're only 6 weeks on. from the end of the second human development space, a co-creative, emergent, self-organized, deeply soulful gathering of thinkers, helpers, disruptors, and just all-round whole human beings that seek to share, learn, grow, and impact their respective worlds and contexts, both individually and collectively. Yet it really does feel, for me, like whole new worlds have emerged and changed since this gathering. So being within this space and co-facilitating with Joe has without a doubt led to my clarity that HD spaces plus my day job in chemicals is why I've been put on this planet. Just so crystal clear. And I hope that's coming through if anybody's popped in and shared and seen what I've shared so far. And you can find one example of this here on LinkedIn. Now, actually reading this back is probably one of the best ways to describe what's been pretty difficult for Joe and I, my co-facilitator and I, to actually describe to date. And Shelley Fletcher, who's the CEO of the Jim Cronin Memorial Fund, and also my dear friend and peer who kindly allows us to use the fund's Heffleton House estate for the gatherings, also struggled to explain exactly what we were doing with other people and to other people. So this blog is my first attempt to offer some clarity as to what goes on and what is possible when we come together as equal, equitable, curious, and high-growth human beings in a truly co-creative, emergent, and exploratory space. I just want to hold that for a second before I carry on with this blog. Whether you're black, brown, disabled, live in the global south, the global north, we do not give a flying right? This space is totally for every single human being that is able to be and wants to be there. Yeah, it's truly transformational. And this is the stunning, stunning, stunning thing. So, thankfully, as well as the share I just offered from Steph, there's also been a lot of other feedback from other people. So the co-creators that helped us get clearer with some very helpful feedback, some of which you'll find going through this blog. So let me share with you what George shared. It gave me clarity as to where I was. It gives me clarity as to where I am. And now I'm getting excited about where I'm going again. This time has been really, really valuable. It is something that I think going forward will be something that is not a nice to have in the slightest. It is absolutely part of my year's plan in terms of building that time in to come and spend with everybody, to reevaluate, to think about where I'm going to go next. It's been hugely valuable. Like, I just want to host, but like those culture patterns that Tema Okun has been working on for over 30 years that are a major problem with racial, and environmental division and injustice right now. We can co-create the conditions to challenge and interrogate and let those go, right? What George has described here is not running with urgency. It's getting still, it's getting present. It's not worrying about being perfect. By coming together in these spaces, we get used to allowing our bodies to calm down and feel into the whole of our lived experience and our human experience, and to challenge areas where these patterns might be holding us back, or indeed others back. So how do these human development spaces come into being? As with all labels, words can be limiting. And that has been one of the challenges of these past 2 years running the HD space experiment. So Joe and I both had a shared vision of gatherings with a difference, spaces with a nature-based frame that allow us to slow down, to connect to our own breath, and with those around us in a more meaningful way, and not just a too often busy surface level way. So we always shared a vision of a truly generative space, one where the insight and wisdom of one human could be the fuel for inquiry and insight in another, and so on. Very improv based in a way, especially based on the wildly different contexts and work that each person does. So Joe and I both had independent views that the environment where these spaces are co-created matters, whilst not causal to one's experience of life. The pace, space, and energy of the environment can have major effects on the connection and interconnection between self, others, and the environment itself. And this has been proven beyond doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt, over these past 2 years. So some thoughts that Joe, my co-facilitator, had were as follows. The talk we had from Shelley, the CEO of the Jim Cronin Fund, about the venue and how purpose-led it is everything that is surrounding us in this 150 acres, the rose garden, the lakes, the fields, the forest, the trees, it's almost like that's the character. That's the facilitator. The location is the facilitator. Joe and I are just there to work with that energy in that space, with this open-hearted, like-hearted, open-minded curiosity that each of these people bring into the space. This is not woo-woo, people. This is as connected to one another in the land we can be in the West. And by doing that, more of that, I think within a corporate setting, I know at a bodily level, in a corporate setting, we can transform stuff really, really quickly. But back to where I shared around the colonized thinking within the workplace, if we don't create these conditions to slow down and to sense and to feel and to allow this to connect with that, we're just going to keep on perpetuating the systemic injustices, environmentally and socially, that we know exist right now. And particularly with those in the global south who are nowhere near this conversation in the West. Okay, so that's increasing context for you. So also, and this was critical, we did not realize it, but we were both looking to enact our individual visions in collaboration with someone else and not to try and do these spaces on our own. So it's been a beautiful merging of minds and spirit. As such, whilst Joe and I could and may offer these spaces as part of our own respective work, our shared intention is to co-facilitate wherever possible. So Joe will be doing her work. Actually, let me try and pull Joe up for those that might be watching this back or looking in the moment. Joe Homstead, amazing, amazing human being. Just want to acknowledge her and pop her onto the screen. Let me just stop this share. And look at me trying to be all technical today. There is the wonderful human. So Joe Homstead, do follow her work. She's doing some amazing work on the south coast of the UK. She's doing a lot of this space holding herself. There's a bit of coaching, a lot of teamwork with charities, with corporations. She's my co-facilitator of these incredible, incredible spaces. So do check out her work. And back to the blog. Trying to be as fluid as I can be. So again, I hope that what's coming through is it's almost like a calling card in some ways. That's why I wanted to do this today, because I want to be able to cut this and help people understand my purpose, my embodiment of why I'm here on this planet, what I'm here to try and hold space for within the chemicals industry and beyond. And then, of course, Joe's doing that in her own respective work. And then we're going to do it in open groups, as we've said, in January and in July as part of the human development space. So what else did other people have to say about this? So Nicola, incredible menopause consultant. Do check out Nicola's work. Nicola Green. She said, I've just loved sharing, listening and being with other people who've come here as absolutely human. Human beings where there is no judgment, is an open space. There is nothing I could say or that anyone would judge me for. And you would come here and be your whole self. This is not the bring your whole self into the workplace BS that gets heavily linked to psychological safety, which is an important topic for sure. This is raw humanity showing up and allowing itself to feel connected to itself and one another in a co-created environment linked with nature. Bloody transformational, quite amazing. So what actually happens within the space itself? So this is, of course, important because for those that may feel a little bit like Nicola was a bit like, what happens? Is it really my sort of thing? Is it a bit woo-woo? It's really not woo-woo. So what actually happens in the space? And the answer, as I said, is best answered by those sharing some of the links and references you can explore for yourself. Again, check out this blog on my Medium page and you'll find all the hyperlinks. So a day and a half in, Joe and I, Annie, George, and also Nicola, we're all open to share their in the moment reflections and feedback and sent to offer A, what happens within the space, and importantly, B, the impact of this co-creative and emergent gatherings. Again, there's another link. I won't play all of that because it's 13 minutes. But you can find that link as part of the blog. And here's some other feedback that was offered with regard to the experience of this co-creative and self-organized gathering, including, quote, giving yourself the breathing space and time to reflect and getting other people's opinions to put ideas forward, quote, quotes, that's how things evolve, how you can explore things. We make space and we take time out. Quote, people said that this morning said that this morning, and there was a bit of emotion around around that actually. When do you ever show up for just 2 days as you in an environment where the people that you are with give you permission to do that, and with no judgment, to really explore this stuff properly for yourself, but with support. Everybody has a voice, the equity of the space, everybody's so considerate of one another. It's been deep but light. No one feels exposed or at risk. That is the container. Another quote from Annie. We're doing it in a group. We're all equal. There are no egos. Nobody's vying for leadership in any shape or form. And that goes for for Joe and Gary. With Joe and Gary holding that space, it's quite amazing. What's important also to mention here is that Joe and I are in the space. We are holding the space together as co-space holders with the environment, but we're also in there learning and part of the co-creative exploratory journey. Really, really stunning. So I love my good friend Mariska, and thank you for my birthday wishes, Mariska, today. She shared this quote when I met her in Amsterdam recently. She said, it's very advanced in what you're leaving out. Just play that back for a second. It's very advanced in what you are leaving out. So Mariska shared this statement when we met in Amsterdam, and I was explaining what the HD space is like. And it really does sum up our approach. And the reason for that being is it's very easy. We're conditioned, Tema Okun's patterns, binary thinking, urgency, I am the only one, perfectionism, etc. We've been conditioned in the West and by colonial thinking that we have to fill the space. Yeah, bigger is more. That's another one of the culture patterns of Tema Okun's work, right? Bigger is more. Accumulation is better. Let's just keep growing. Let's keep accumulating, keep buying. Like, we've been conditioned that that's important. Whereas what we do in these spaces is we just break it all down, take it all away, and then we just build back up enough structure and enough framing that allows us to do the work that we're all there to do collectively. So literally everything across these 2 days has been seeded by 2 to 3 connection stroke thinking rounds. So what were some of the more real life impacts for those attended the last human development space? I'll skip over this one because I played the video earlier of what Steph shared. You can read that for yourself. Again, another beautiful bit of feedback from Nicola. I didn't know what to expect of 2 days in a human development space, but here is the outcome. Yep, smiling faces, happy individuals, clarity, and time with the most amazing individuals, many of whom I've never met before. That's deep community right there. I would invite. His Steph's reflections, that's the one that I played earlier in this live stream. And also Joe shared, my co-facilitator, the ease, the listening, the equal time, the appreciation, the inaction being action. I want to hold that for a second as well. That is colonial thinking busting right there. Inaction being action, giving ourselves permission to let something emerge organically, naturally, quietly. That's massive. This is something we are not conditioned or allowed to do in the workplace. Collaboration, confidential, non-judgment, constructive challenge, psychologically safe, trusting self and one another, and faith in the process. That's what these spaces are all about. And for me, I felt these were very connected, authentic, vulnerable, honest about everybody's shares. We literally turned up again with no plan, just a loose frame as to when we would break. And we co-created everything from there. So reflective question, do we offer these spaces within corporates and business as well? Yes, Joe and I do. We're in talk with a number of leaders and companies about using a mix of locations. We've got the place that I'm very close to in Dorset in the UK. Joe's got a place in Surrey she's speaking to. Joe's got access to some other woodland spaces. But we are very clear, nature aligned, connectively, slowing down, deep sea for organization and self-management based on what we want, based on the people that are there. That's the way forward. That's colonial thinking busting. That is potentially going to make whole new worlds if we allow ourselves to come together and co-create new narratives in that way. So what is clear is that the slowed down pace, the blend of Joe and I's over 40 years experience, crossing HR, people, culture, international sales, strategy, facilitation, and a shared deep interest in holding space for the next generation of thinking, business and human-centered design. And at this point in history, I think we'd all agree, we're at a liminal space between two worlds, that which is dying, literally and figuratively, and too many people, by the way, in the global south because of it. It's never been more important to connect to ourselves, to one another, and to systems that sustain all life. There will be those that might see or hear this going, yeah, but to bring it into a corporate, how do I justify the return on investment that's slowing down? That's colonial thinking right there. First invitation to get curious with Tema Okun's patterns of behavior. What are you afraid of? Point number one. And also, first of all, this is a question that is even more important to having dialogue together. So yet curiously, and without even realizing it fully at the time, I've held similar spaces within my corporate day job, with my current employer within the chemicals industry, but I wouldn't have called them these types of development spaces. But to offer some invitation for curiosity, I and my team within my chemicals day job added 6 million in sales and 1.5 million in gross margin over 3 years between 2015 and 2018 by intentionally slowing down, by connecting, by evaluating what works, what doesn't work, and critically, we co-created new ways of organizing and doing business together. So I'm just going to share that very, very quickly, because this might be helpful for some of you out there. If you're watching this live or watch this back, I've been on a hell of a journey myself the last 3 years, as we all are. But this particular blog is actually on the HR Zone website. It's called "Do We Really Need to Measure the ROI of Our People?" If you go to hrzone.com and you actually look out for Gary Turner on there. I've actually written not only this particular blog where I'm sharing very openly about, we took courageous steps, we ran experiments, what changed, co-creation of a team of set values. We moved from mindset shift to collective growth mindset, safe to challenge, blah, 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 blah. Lots of other stuff. And there's also some other writing that you can find from myself on HR Zone, where I talk about diversity and inclusion, waking up to your privilege and bias, why sleepwalking through life is halting the rise of socially responsible workplaces, why VUCA could actually be a good thing in the business world, in our business. Do check out my HR Zone website and you can find out more stuff around that. But again, what's the link here? The link to this blog, the link to these connected spaces, human development spaces that Joe Homstead and I are co-creating, it's all about intentional slowing down. It's all about trusting emergence and co-creation and self-organization. Now, there's a lot of good work already about self-management and self-organization. This links to that, but I would assert this goes a step deeper. This is intentionally colonial thinking busting. It's pattern breaking. Like, by us doing this more, we start to break those patterns and we start to set, but while centering those communities and those parts of our business models that are causing the most harm. If we can slow down enough and allow ourselves the grace and the curiosity to center that and work on our outdated patterns of behavior and thinking, we might just lay the seeds for truly transforming environmental and social injustice. We just might. But if we don't actually do the work in our colonial mindsets and truly challenge the organizational structures, systems, learning and development structures, organizational design structures, pay structures, we're just going to keep doing the same old stuff. That's the reality. Mindset work, organizational design work, all while centering those most harmed. This is the work. This is my work for the rest of my life on this planet. And these HD spaces are part of that. So what's the biggest learnings been for me personally as Gary, as part of these gatherings? All delegates made it clear that the way that Joe and I were not only co-facilitating the space, but we're in the experience with them, sharing, learning, growing. It was really quite profound. And it's also something that was very intuitive and also unplanned for Joe and I. Notice the point here, being in the experience and trusting intuition and our experience with and for one another. Where do we do that in the workplace? Another major learning was that organizing with zero structure actually leads to some people feeling unsafe and quite lost. So to have a bare bones of a structure with a lot of open space for co-creation and time and energy, but enough structure of start, middle, and end, that was a big learning from 2021, and it definitely improved the step change that we witnessed this year. And then finally, the critical importance of taking time to co-create shared intentions and boundaries for the space, e.g. trust, constructive challenge, listening, equity of the space, mutual respect. This is not soft stuff, people. This is not soft skills. That is a way for the binary thinking of the old world. Again, supremacy culture patterns. Yeah, soft skills. That is a culture pattern. That's a colonial thinking pattern to basically degrade and colonize and chuck out a whole swathe of people that have got great ideas of how to actually heal the workplace and ourselves. So if you're curious to join us, we've got 2 now, as I say. We've got 4th to the 6th of July. The 2-day event is the 5th and 6th of July 2023. And what's not in this blog is now January 18th and 19th, 2023. So we're doing 2 human development spaces in the UK, 18th, 19th of January 2023, and also the 5th and 6th of July 2023. We'd love for you to join us. You can find the links to the July event there. You can find Joe's contact details. You can find my contact details. This has been 1 hour, 16 minutes of personal reflection. If you join me at any point, thank you. I know that Trina Casey did, wonderful human being, who joined me as part of one of my new ventures, which is an open-hearted exploration of decolonizing our mindsets through generative listening. I'm just going to try and find the link to that quickly before I sign off. Trina is an amazing human, one of the most wise humans that I've had the blessing to engage with. Where's my playlist? Creative playlists. But I'm going to be doing more of these as well. I probably won't do another one today because I need to get off and actually live a bit of my birthday life. But let me just share the screen again, just quickly, because I want you to know that there's this playlist that exists. Okay. Maybe just change a little banner quickly. This playlist is a playlist for basically, if you type that link in, if you can try and grab hold of that, there's a number of decolonizing our mindsets through generative listening. And Trina Casey was the amazing human.
We're just children looking
is.
for guidance because we know we're lost. Everybody feels that innately, that there's a disconnect, and they can't put their finger on it because they haven't been given the silence and the space to stop, to reflect and go, what's that nothingness? That's not too scary. I thought I'd be terrified of silence. Feels kind of good.
In fact, it's where the innovation and the insight comes from, right? And I've got to get you, I'm putting it out to the universe. I also do a community. So that is the incredible Trina Casey. Please do check out their work on LinkedIn. That's me done. That's my birthday gift to Gary. Reviewing 4 of my most recent blogs, weaving them together, connecting them together, answering the question that many people have asked me over the last 5 years, which is, how do you fit it all in? What do you actually do for a job, Gary? What I do is I actually work in the chemicals industry. I will be staying in the chemicals industry. It's an industry ripe for healing, for reconnection, for doing the mindset work, the decolonial mindset work and structural work that needs to happen over the next many, many years. And alongside that, I'll be holding these human development spaces, both for open groups as we are in January and July, and also within the workplace as well. That's my life's work. It's so critically clear. It's now so obvious. And I'm really looking forward to the challenge, the ongoing shedding of my own ego and the culture patterns that I continue to perpetuate. And I'm really looking forward to meeting more people from the global south who have got way more wisdom, way more insight, and they're just not in the room. They're not in our newsreels. They're not in our organizational structures. And they sure as hell aren't being considered when we look to try and grow at all costs continuously. So there I am. Happy birthday to me. 1 hour, 20 minutes. Thanks, everyone. If you popped along, this is a very, very interesting day. My 46th birthday. Much love, one and all. Take care.